What if I told you that a sermon from nearly 400 years ago could hold a powerful mirror up to our own times? Well, today we're going to unpack A Plea for Alms by a 17th century preacher named Thomas Watson. And you're about to see why his passionate argument for generosity, well, it feels more relevant than ever. Right out of the gate, Watson hits his audience with this. Conflicts have never been more intense, and charity has never been colder. Does that sound familiar? This could have been written yesterday. For him, this wasn't just some casual observation. It was a diagnosis of a serious societal crisis he felt he just had to address. So, to really get why he was so fired up, let's just picture it. London, 1658. The city is in turmoil. And in the middle of all this chaos, Watson sees this deep, spiritual problem taking root. People were just becoming uncharitable. Their hearts, in his words, were being shut together as with a seal. Okay, so how does he even begin to build his case? Well, he anchors his entire argument in just one single verse from the Bible, Psalm 112, verse 9. But he doesn't just read it and move on. No, he unpacks it, piece by piece, using these really powerful metaphors that just bring the whole thing to life. Let's see how he does it. First, you've got this phrase, he has scattered abroad. Watson's imagery here is just fantastic. He's comparing the act of giving to a farmer scattering precious seed. Now, think about that for a second. It's not about losing something, is it? It's an act of faith. It's an investment. You scatter the seed of your charity, fully trusting that it's going to yield a huge harvest later on. So, who gets this seed? The verse says, he has given to the poor. And listen to how vividly Watson describes them. He says they're empty or drained dry, like a riverbed after a long drought. So the whole purpose of giving, then, is to refill these empty ponds with what he beautifully calls the silver streams of charity. And what's the result of all this? The last part of the verse, his righteousness endures forever. For Watson, this means the impact of giving isn't just a fleeting thing. He argues it creates these lasting benefits, inner peace, public honor, and an eternal reward. That simple act of scattering some golden seed, it echoes into eternity. So that's his core metaphor. But Watson doesn't stop there. He goes deeper. He makes the case that true charity isn't just some random, spontaneous thing. No, it's a deliberate, three-part process. He actually lays out a framework for what he calls the anatomy of charity. And here are the 3 steps he lays out. It all starts with wise consideration, actually taking the time to understand poverty. That then leads to tender compassion, a real, genuine emotional response. And only then does it end in the act itself, generous giving. For Watson, if you give without both thought and feeling, it's just incomplete. Okay, so he's defined what real charity is. But now comes the hard part. He has to convince his audience why they should actually do it. And this is where he rolls out a whole series of powerful arguments, designed to persuade even the most skeptical person in the room. Here's the heart of his logic. He says generosity is our very purpose for being here. It's how we reflect the divine. He reminds his wealthy listeners that, hey, you're not actually owners of your riches. You're just stewards. And my favorite point he makes is that we all, every single one of us, live on the alms of creation, right? The sun's light, the earth's fruit. So how can we not share in turn? Now, Watson was a really practical guy. He knew his audience would have excuses, and he confronts the biggest one head-on, the fear of scarcity. It's a question we still ask today, isn't it? What if I give away too much and I don't have enough left for myself? His answer is another brilliant metaphor. He argues that generosity doesn't actually deplete you, it makes you more prosperous. Think about a well. The more water you draw from it, the more freely the fresh water springs up to replace it. He saw a shared estate the exact same way. It doesn't shrink when you use it, it flourishes. So, having made this powerful case for why people should give, Watson then pivots to the practical stuff, the how. He gives a super clear set of rules for performing charity in a way that's meaningful and effective. For him, the act is just as important as the intention. So he lays out 6 clear rules. You have to give cheerfully, not grudgingly. The money has to be justly acquired, right? Your motivation has to be love, not getting praised by others. It has to be done with humility and with wisdom. And finally, and I think this one is fascinating, it has to be done with thankfulness. You should be grateful that you're even in a position to give in the first place. And just to drive home that point about humility, he uses this beautiful image. He says we should be like the silkworm, which creates this amazing, fine silk, but it remains hidden inside its own work. The point isn't to be seen. The point is to create something good and hide yourself from pride. So, why does any of this matter to us, hundreds of years later? Well, Watson's sermon isn't just some dusty old religious text. It's a really profound meditation on the human practice of giving, with lessons that absolutely transcend his time. So here's the big takeaway. Watson totally reframes generosity. It's not just a transaction, like writing a check. It's a craft, a discipline. It's a thoughtful, heartfelt, and humble practice that has its own art and its own deep purpose. And that kind of leaves us with a question to chew on. In a world that is still full of conflict, where charity can often feel pretty cold, what does Watson's plea for alms really mean for us? And maybe more importantly, what would it look like if we all tried to truly practice the art of giving?